that you... Okay, it was a recording announcement. So it will be really like the programming lessons that you got, so that we will see how Dart needs to be updated and how it improved on the way. But before diving into that topic, I would like to introduce myself, like who I am and what I am doing. Actually, I'm Esra Kadah. I'm co-organizer of Flutteristas, and Flutteristas is a worldwide community of people whose gender identity is either female or non-binary and have an interest in Flutter SDK. And I'm mostly doing public speakings in Flutter communities. I was an organizer in GDG WTM communities, and currently working as a full-time developer in Antuka Mobile, which is also a Berlin-based company. And with all of this, this is actually like, I can easily say the summary of my last years that I'm putting effort in. And when I mentioned the WTM communities and Flutteristas, I actually want you to guess a number, and you can leave the number and your guesses to the chat. And this number is about, what do you think about software developer gender distribution worldwide as of 2022? Like now we know, like, okay, women and non-binary people like having, let's say, when we think about this number, we say like maybe 40%, maybe 25%, and so on. Like, I would like to hear your guesses in chat about this gender distribution. Feel free to leave it down here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
When you say gender distribution, can you repeat that again? Is it the amount of what in percentage?
Like maybe male percentage or like woman non-binary percentage. For example, we can say like 30% women, 70% or 70% male, and so on. Like, because when we think about this number, we say that, okay, women and non-binary people, they are not so much in technology, or we say that it is not equal yet. But when we think about this number, I will just share you the survey result. And the amount is actually, we see that in 2022 results, the men is like literally 92% of the software developer gender distribution. Like this is the worldwide result of 2022, and all details are announced in Statista. So you can actually reach this number too. And with the Flutteristas and with the women tech maker communities, we are actually supporting people who is gender identities, female and non-binary, because we know that there is a gap, but we are not aware of how big this gap is. So that's why I actually want to put this one here as well. And if there is any female or non-binary attendee who is watching this and not part of Flutteristas, please go flutteristas.org and join us. We just had a conference with collaboration of more than 30 people, had 23 speakers. More than is the first-time speakers, so we are actually trying to increase number of women and non-binary in community as speakers and contributors as well. And all content is accessible in Flutter community official YouTube channel that you can see it. And normally, if we just waited a little, I would actually keep this part longer to ask you. I want to get to know you too, like to learn about you and what's your interests. But now I'm gonna just skip this part so that we can start rolling with cleaner Flutter code with Dart tree. So how is it started and what is our agenda today is we're gonna go through a pattern matching with JSON validation. We will see more JSON validation with pattern matching. It will be like another example. Then we will go for this structuring. Then we will go exhaustiveness checking. We will go over records, and we will do more exhaustiveness checking together. And in this presentation, you will not see super fancy designs or like live working code examples. We will see how it is working, and we will see the logic behind these new improvements. So this is the, let's say, the app idea, the hypothetical app, which is a social media app. It's gonna have posts and user can like and comment on these posts. And there is no demo or live coding. This is just the context data that we will be looking at. So we have a post and we have comments. What you normally do is actually we use a common workflow to talk about these features. As you all know, we start with raw JSON data. We validate the JSON and we turn into a typed object to ensure it is what our app expects. And then we use Flutter to display data from that object, right? Like you all use this one. And what we have is a regular class hierarchy. It is pretty simple now. Like it has post, it has user, post will represent the social media post, user will represent the individuals interacting with these posts. And as you will see, there will be no much detail because you know what's going on behind already, or you have similar examples. We will see how Dart is handling this part. So let's take a look at a couple examples, especially while validating the JSON. So we have JSON validation criteria. So let's define the JSON validation quickly. So what does JSON validation means? JSON validation ensures the data we receive is what we expect. First, we need to check for expected properties. And does the JSON have all the keys we need? For example, ID, for example, user. Next, we verify the types. Is the ID a string or the likes are the integer? And sometimes we verify the types. We need to ensure the certain keys have specific values with what we called key value pair, like the post type being image or text. So this step is crucial to prevent errors in the app due to unexpected data formats. So that's why actually you are doing this. So let's say here is a data structure we will be working with. While this isn't technically JSON, it represents the kind of map we get when we decode JSON in Dart using JSON decode function. For the sake of simplicity in this presentation, we will refer to this as starting JSON data. And this data represents the post on our hypothetical social media platform, and which supports the various post types like images and text. So specifically, we are looking for an image post here with a complete user information. We know who posted the image. So, and I know some of you might be thinking, hey, this isn't a Dart map, not a raw JSON. And you are right. And this is how we often deal with JSON in Dart as maps after decoding. So we will be focused on the structure of the content right now. Let's see how the validation process goes. So when you have the traditional JSON validation, I know there are multiple ways to write this code as well. Like this is how it comes with Flutter, how it comes with the multiple solutions of libraries, decodings, and so on. So we are acknowledging this. There are lots of generators and packages to metasterize the validation. So this is just one of them. And before .3, you would just validate JSON like this. And for each property you expect, you check if the key exists. That the value is not null and the value is in correct type. Let's just highlight one of them to be able to focus better. So for example, here we make sure the key likes exist, that the value for the key is not null, and also finally likes as an integer. Finally, you repeat this process for user. Or what we can do is we can use the pattern matching, which is introduced. So this is how you would implement the same validation with patterns. Like it looks pretty clean. And let's highlight the interesting part for us. This is actually the part that we call pattern. And a pattern represents the shape of the value that you want to compare to an actual value. And in Dart3's pattern matching, we streamline this process. we define a pattern that the JSON must match, checking the keys, type, non-nullability in concise way. And in this case, so the JSON part is actually highlighted here. We want to match the shape of the variable called JSON against the pattern. This does everything that the previous example did. For example, likes integer, and we see a wildcard there. This single line checks the property likes exist in JSON map and its value of type of integer. And implicitly, it checks the value is not null. It's actually the underscore syntax called wildcard to denote that we don't care what the value is. It could be any integer. And wildcards will be covered a little bit more details in later. And if you remember, this is what the line looked like without pattern matching. Just giving a second for you to check and moving. So as you can see, there is actually another submap under the user key is also recursively validated its pattern. So actually the pattern matching, it's allowing us to validate nested objects like user data, which is pretty nice. And when we go for if case syntax, so now this is the part that we are pointing out, the if case syntax. If this case match our JSON against the pattern directly within an if statement, this is perfect for single pattern validations, which is super common in JSON processing. And I know when you hear patterns, you generally associate it with switch statements, and we will also see them shortly. And if case statements are quite handy when you only need to check against a single pattern. So, which is our case right now. So let's go to see more tricks. That's not all pattern matching can do though. Imagine our requirements have changed. So let's change our requirements in the app. Now we have text posts and image posts, which extend to post class. And now we are adding user. What did we do was we had the image post, we just added a text post into it. So now the incoming JSON now looks like this. It has image, it has text, it contains two different object types. They are very similar, but second object represent with the text. And rather than an image path, it has a post body property. Now we will just adjust our pattern matching to handle both types. Let's recall the old validation. This was the generated one that you have without patterns. We just need to add a couple more validations to handle our new object type. And let's add this one in old way. So how it generates, how it extends the validation logic, it needs to be adding something like this. And this is just not even looking cool. It introduced our first or operator, which is just like harder to read. It just looks, we don't like how it looks. This is also not readable. And let's see how we can do it with patterns. Now, when you see this, some of you can think like you already have pretty good tricks to avoid this. But this is actually showing how bulky the code can be and why behind the scenes Dart needed to introduce these features. Imagine as a junior or a new starter, you just saw this code, you just saw this one generated, and now you need to maintain this. Like this complexity just highlights the limitations of the traditional approach behind, especially as our data requirements become more diverse and we are just talking about just adding 2-3 super simple class and one more feature on it. So let's go for simplified validation with patterns. So we are adding the logical or operators to the type. You see text, image, ID string, likes integer, and user just goes. So this is our simplified pattern matching. This allows us to matching against the pattern And using logical OR, it's elegantly handled both in a single statement. I'm just checking. So here, what you see is, in this case, in the pattern validation, you don't see post body and image path here. We omitted that and they are missing, right? So when using map patterns, then missing properties will be just ignored. So we can just leave those off and we can validate that part separately in a switch expression. So that's actually how it comes handy and how it comes simply. So let's make our first if case. The one that you see is the if case. Let's make our first switch expression using this. So when I just change it on top, you can see it becomes a switch. We are matching against two separate patterns right now. This way we handle both text post and image post seamlessly. So now I'm going to continue to explanation. Okay, this is the highlighted part. So it is especially useful in this case because we have two different subtypes for the post class, text post and image post, and we want to just return one of the corresponds with the type property. And in text one, we see post body is a string, image one, we see image as a type, and image path as a string. So depending on the match, it will just return the appropriate post type. So this is most common use case for pattern matching in switch expressions. And in technical language, you can also say it like returning or operating on related subtypes with a common ancestor. So that's actually how it does and how the packages that you are using handling these cases and how you are writing it down behind the scenes and how it works down there. Now let's take this example and let's show even more features of patterns, starting with destructuring. So let's recall our pattern matching example. You see the wildcards are highlighted. We know that this is matching any value of the correct type and like property. And wildcards are great when you don't need an actual value. We say any of them would work, but what if we do? This is where destructuring comes to the play. Let's pick up the integer example in likes. So we are saying a property called likes must exist and its value must be an integer. And we don't care what integer is in this expression. This is useful. Now let's test the structure is, and I will just update the method now, and I will just start using directly the variable rather than validating JSON in this method and turning around and calling from it. Let's do an object creation in a single method. So what we come up with. So now we updated this one and we said we're going to do object creation in a single method. In this updated method, instead of using wildcards, we have assigned variable names to the values we are directly matching. And this lets us directly use the values to create the text post object. As you can see, the ID type likes there just used down in the last line in text post, and I'm directly passing them as variables. And this process is known as destructuring, where we extract values from the pattern and use them directly. And as you can see in text post or while parsing it, where is the dot from JSON? There is no from JSON function anymore. So in this version of the method, I'm still matching the pattern against a JSON, and I'm returning a text post object without calling from JSON because the function itself, look at the top line, is the from JSON method itself. So this is all the refactoring we will do on the JSON validation part. And let's see how we can do and how we can use it in our Flutter widget code. So maybe our code looks like this. It's pretty standard Flutter code that you can see in any project. And we are just creating a post, then passing it to the text post widget or image post widget, depending on what type the post is. And this part also can be improved with Dart3 features. Let's do it more efficient and a little bit more expressive. So far, we have refactored our JSON validation. The so code is less verbose and more readable. And the data we were working with was kind of simple. What if it isn't as simple like we have right now? Let's say we had a PM came us and demanded, oh, I want to have like video posts to the app. You added video posts. And then let's say I want to give users the option to start paying for extra features. So we need another user type, normal user, paid user. And of course, we're going to add an admin users because all apps need admin users. So now class hierarchy becomes more complicated, and our incoming data will be also more complicated as well. Now you see a type paid user. So notably, now we have type field in our incoming data. Now JSON reflects all changes. Additional type for users indicating their category, paid user, normal user, admin user. Now this complexity will require more robust validation approach. When I go this part, the validation portion will not change that much, but despite this changing, our pattern matching will still stay strong, and we can easily extend our switch cases to handle new post types like video posts, keeping our validation logic efficient and manageable. And we could handle the changes by adding some switch expressions and handling the user validation in a separate method. As you can see, user from JSON is just going to a separate method. And the more interesting changes are back in actually Flutter code. Let's switch to widget code. Now we have additional post types with user types, and we're going to have the additional widgets to show them, right? Let's add them. So this example going to end up with 2 more statements, return to the correct widgets. Our code is not so bad, like pretty readable, thanks to collection of if statements, but it does introduce some problems, like more problems, like what is? First off, it seems like I forgot about admin users and it just looks good. And it's not giving me or showing me any errors. And what if the post and user objects doesn't match any of the cases here? The end user will just see a blank screen where the post data should be, right? Like, because there is nothing to show there. And while we could just another line for admin user, it still doesn't protect us in the future when more post types or user types added to the app. So this is actually okay, readable, but there are a lot of stuff that we can miss in the feature and a lot of things that we don't have under control. And Dart3 gives us tools to prevent that in the form of what we called exhaustiveness checking. And if any, like, I will just sip my coffee, sorry. So if you haven't heard about exhaustiveness checking before, you might be like, you probably use this, but maybe you don't know the definition of it. Exhaustiveness checking actually refers to a compile time error. Like it is possible for a value to enter a switch, but not match any of the cases. For example, Dart compiler, when you see these examples, you know that it knows about every possible value of the item which gonna switch over. For example, the first one, Dart knows for sure you're gonna go over true and false to cover possible cases. So is true Boolean, it just go 2 types. So you don't need the default case here, whereas usually you actually need to do. And when you go for exhaustiveness checking, the one on the right, and this is also exists for enumerations. And in the second example, the analyzer would yell at you because there is no fish example here. You have the cat animals dog, case animals cat. and it's gonna ask for, give me a default case to catch everything, and where is fish? And in Dart 3, now you can actually bring these features in your own custom classes, which we don't have it before. And now this is actually what we define exhaustiveness, and let's carry it to our classes. We need to prepare our classes for exhaustiveness checking. So Dart 3 introduces sealed classes, which enhance the exhaustiveness checking that we mentioned before. By marking our post and user classes as sealed, we ensure that now all subclasses like text post, image post, video post, normal admin paid users, now we are being sure that they are known and handled in our code. So this is pretty much taking the advantage of exhaustiveness checking. Now we are not using abstract, but sealed. Sealed modifier actually prevents the class from being extended or implemented outside its own library. So Dart will always know where to look and how many stuff that it has, how many things it needs to iterate through. So when we refactor out our code with sealed classes, Dart is 100% positive that every possible subtype of post is in the same library. Therefore, it can tell you when you miss a type now. It will not compile if when you miss a type. And since it knows there is no missing type, then you don't even need a default case. So let's comment out our last case, the video post. You will see that in switch part, Dart's gonna throw you an error. It will just say, the type post is not exhaustively matched with the switch cases because it doesn't seem video post. Try adding a wildcard pattern or a case that matches a video post. So if I go back to the library and then add a subtype called like GIF post that people can just upload their GIFs, then our code will not compile until we handle the case in this method. Like, pretty nice. Especially if you are working with a new project, if you're working with lots of team members, or you're just going back your code after 1 month, you will not remember every case. And this is just giving us super secure and reliable code. So of course, in this example, we will need to add a similar switch expression for getting the correct outer widget. And let's do it even better with destructuring. So now you have get outer widget, it gets outer in it, switching by the cases of outer and returning back u.widget. So I'm just gonna give a couple seconds to just have a look. So post widget getting post, switching over post types, and just returning text, images, and videos. Let's do it a little bit better. So this was the destructuring example that we saw earlier, and we were pulling the values out of the object being matched against the pattern so that we can use values in the return statement, right? So this was how we are creating the post, right? When you look the beginning of it. Now we can refactor these two methods, user and post, to get the widgets look like this. So it's just get post widgets, getting post in it. Now you see there is two widget types getting returned. And there are only 3 post types right now and 3 user types. So there should be actually 9 total cases to match against. So because of the space, you see only 3 of them. So there is a lot going on here. And I will just walk you through in pieces. Let's go. So this is an example of called like object destructuring. This line of code saying, I want to match against any post type, which is a text post, and also has a user property type of a normal user. And the new syntax, this is also like freshly introduced, new syntax here in colon, the normal user one. This is just a syntactic trigger, we say. What does it mean? These 2 lines are actually equivalent. So the second example looks like any other named argument in Dart code that you see before. And if you are naming the variable that you are destructuring the same as the property name, which is user here, the property can be just inferred and left out. So you can just use column and you can just use it like this. And as you expect, the pattern matching algorithm is also smart enough to ensure that we've written the code that matches against every combination of the values. It's going to work recursively, so you could get much more complicated than this with nesting objects, and you will have no issues. Like Dart gonna calculate every single possibility for you, and it's gonna scream when you are not handling a case. Let's comment this one out. The analyzer gonna yell at me, and this guarantees the application gonna consider everything. Dart analyzer would immediately flag this as an error. This is just awesome. The fifth one is records. In that same example, there is also a new feature called records. So you might notice that we are returning 2 widgets from this method. This is possible thanks to another new feature of Dart 3 records. If you use a language like maybe Python before, you might also see this one before. And records now a new collection type that can hold an arbitrary number of elements. And importantly, which is actually quite cool, these elements can be also in different type. So this one is like widget, but it could be widget integer, it could be string integer or whatsoever. So records are pretty useful for passing multiple values around that are logically linked when it would be the verbose to create a class. And you can't use a list because then you have to use values type. Right. Now, when you hear this, you can say, okay, Esra, what are you saying? Let's see an example. So imagine the build method. Your widget looks like this. So you have a children list of widgets, post widget, and outer widget. If you want, and destructuring the values into results in 2 separate variables, which is still in record syntax, you use get post widget, outer widget, and pass it in. This is what you can do right now. Before Dart 3, if you want to do this, then what you would do, you would get the post in, you would wrap it to a column, children post outer, and then return it as one widget, right? Because this is what is possible for you to do. You can return only one thing from that function, which should be a widget. Then what you're gonna end up with, you get a widget, then you parse the widget, then you end up a column inside a column and adding unnecessary overhead to your application to make it easily usable. And now we are also not using 2 columns. Of course, we are just directly passing it down. And you can also use other options to returning multiple widgets, but using records doesn't require you to use that tricks or any unnecessary code. Now Dart actually just step up here and result your extra work. And when we go for more exhaustiveness checking, and okay, pretty cool. We implemented our separate user and post types, and we rendered them in separate widgets. Let's say our PM just came back again, and they informed us that there is a new structure of how users can comment on posts. Admins can comment on all posts. Paid users can comment on all posts of other paid users or normal users, but not admin users. And normal users cannot comment on posts at all. Something about blue check marks not driving enough revenue. Now they are saying, okay, normal users will not comment, only paid users can, but of course, admin users can do everything. Let's remember our beautiful app. Now we need to update the comment button so that it is only active for the correct user types under correct circumstances. So let's go to work on the comment button with the new conditions. So now we need to know who currently logged in. and who wrote the post that being looked at. And because we care about good user experience, we need to consider when user is hovering over with their mouse. And we want to give feedback when the button is clicked. And the button should be inactive if a user hasn't entered any text. So how should we write this complex logic now? Because we have lots of combinations right now. Let's bring it on a scary code. We could use if statements and wrote some code like this. But this is not maintainable code. If we add another subtype of the user that has different rules about commenting, it will be a nightmare to update. Plus, it will be quite difficult to get 100% test coverage against this logic tree. And because our user class is sealed and Booleans are exhaustive by default, the record magic could work like this. We will have the compiler figure it out all for us. This logic is still relatively complex, and there are still many different cases to match against, but analyzer gonna tell you which classes you are missing as you are writing. It is literally impossible to miss a case if you plan to ship your code. Now you can see all cases. And it is pretty readable. Compiler checks for you, and you are just being sure that you covered every case as you expected. That was the record magic. Of course, once you listen this, you might feel a little overwhelmed. You might feel like, oh, what did I look? Or you might feel like, I want to see more code. I want to have a code lab, because this topic is something more you would understand when you have examples and you maybe write down, maybe you just write your own code. And this resource brought to you by, thanks to Flutter Speakers Toolkit by Eric, if you know him, Eric Weinmühl. He's also DevRel for Flutter and Firebase. Of course, pattern matching, you can use these resources to dig even deeper. You can check Dart Dev, and Maria also wrote a Medium article about this. Yes, I think you all can see this tab. So this is actually Maria's Medium article. And while she is mentioning about the functional approach, how they are handling it and so on, so assigning, I will just show this one, the Dart tree features. While they are checking visible outside template, that they have this huge else if for checks in mixin declaration, enum declaration, class declaration. It's actually checking whether this part used or is it accessible outside of the class and so on. It is like a huge if else. And now the 16 lines of if else statement with this feature, this is also just implemented. So you can see in the SDK analyzer package, now you see check visible outside template, also using switch cases with the new syntax, with the new destructuring. And then it is just getting super simple. Even used in analyzer, this is also merged already up and running. And you can see all in the Medium articles, even more in Code Labs. So I'm just leaving this part. You can take a screenshot, you can scan the QR code. And thanks for listening. I think now we are just on time, just 10 seconds early.
Yes, thank you, Ezra. It's been a great talk. Thank you for coming to our meetup. We are proud to host you. And if you have any questions, it's a good time to unmute yourself and ask. Ezra and I will be able to answer. And in the meantime, in the chat, I'm going to publish a Google form So if you want to join into the raffle, we are going to send a Lumen device to one of you. But you first need to fill up the form, and then I will ask ChatGPT to randomly select one of you. So the form is out there. Let me know if there are any issues. And again, thank you everyone for joining in. And if it is, if you find those relatively short online meetings something that you want to see more in the future, also let me know. If you want to speak in the future meetings of the meetup, also let me know. Hopefully, when things are stabilized in Israel, we will return to the physical meetings as well. But I think we will have to wait a bit with those. Questions? Okay. In the room, maybe you have a question?
About questions, you can ping me anytime in my socials. I think I'm still sharing the screen because what I also feel like this is just makes you feel like, oh, okay, because now we see records in, for example, Python, and while we were checking Dart, we were like, why they don't have it? Now we see the requirements, and now we see why the Dart team, why the Flutter team is working on it, why we are just having from Dart 3, Dart 3.1, 3.2. So we are actually seeing something quite interesting, that a language is just improving with our needs. So it might be mostly like, oh, understanding the concept, understanding why Flutter team is bringing it to the Dart. I think you will grab it more when you go through code labs, when you go through the Medium articles. For me, it took like, I don't know how many times I just go through that article. I was like, why do they need it? And at the end, you just feel like, yeah, that's pretty good, pretty makes sense. And now, of course, implementing it to the language that right now thousands of people are using, of course, it's taking a little bit of time, because when they announced the 3.0 alpha, I think we were in Flutter Forward. It was in Kenya, like around January, beginning of February or something. Then it took a while in Google I/O, then they released this stable version of it.
Ezra, I wanted to ask you, what feature do you like the most, and what feature you use the most?
I think the sealed classes are pretty much something that I love, because I am the person who is actually taking care of the tests mostly in the team in general. And just being sure that you have every case. Of course, now we have ChatGPT. Of course, we have now generative stuff that is just checking the functions and so on for us. But I think the solutions like avoiding you to make a mistake, or it just when it's just scream you back like, oh, you missed this one, or you are not handling this case anymore, I think it's just pretty useful. And it's just making the Dart way much more smarter to develop. And that's actually one of my favorites. And thank you. I see I got a lot of thank yous in the chat. It's amazing to meet with you.
Yes, we will get access to the recording and the presentation. I think it's this QR code, probably.
This QR code gonna lead you through the code lab, dive into Dart patterns and record. It has the official documentation.
Okay, so do you want me, do you want to send me the URL for the presentation and I post it?
I can share this one. Yeah, I can share that.
Yeah.
This one will be iterated later with comparing Dart 3 alpha, 3.0 through 3.1, 3.2. But I can keep this version and share with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I will publish it in the meetup. The presentation and the recording, of course, will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and it's a good time also to broadcast that we have a YouTube channel for the meetup with all the recordings of the previous meetings. I'll also share in the chat the URL. The lottery is pending. If everyone filled up the form, we can do that. Do we wait for anyone? Okay, actually, we have a question. Ezra, you want to look at the chat?
Let me open the chat. Oh, I'm just checking. How do you keep the balance between a thin language that deploys with any app and a rich language that we can use with a lot of functionality? How to reply this? Wow, that's actually a pretty good one. Let's think about it. Give me a second. There is a lot of actually trade-off. Like it's actually a channel. It's actually a challenge. Let me think about this. Maybe I can also just come you back with this. This should be like lightweight enough for efficient deployment. And what language also should be easier to understand, because when you see the bulk code, it is not a code that I want to touch as a developer. Like this, the generated code, this thing. I am actually, I think I can't answer this one by myself only. Like if you have any idea, please add your comments, because
maybe I can rephrase
how
it.
to keep that balance.
I mean, for example, we have a very rich languages such as C# and other languages, and we have Flutter, which is it's not new. Okay, the Dart is not new, but it's very poor in a lot of areas. For example, the date time handling is very poor. You don't have a lot of functionalities about time zones, and you don't have a lot of functionalities in many areas. So you need to go and write it by yourself or use libraries. But on the other end, I can see that another functionality that I think that is less important than date time, such as I don't know, records, for example. I'm from the old age, I prefer to create a new object about it that you edit. So how do you, who is in charge? How do you keep the balance between those decisions? How do you, because the runtime is deployed with any app, so you have to have a minimal runtime. So
What I know from the Flutter community is actually the community feedback is giving a lot of reasons to evaluate, because they are taking lots of feedbacks, lots of tickets, then we are just upvoting. And I know some of the features are just added because they were one of the most upvoted ones. Let me just even check one. It was in one of the Medium articles, I guess. Meanwhile, Ariel just texts, form is going to be closed in 1 minute. Hurry up if you're working on it. So I will just announce it for him. And I'm just checking the one that I'm showing.
לא נכנסתי לזום עכשיו עד שאני אכנס.
Okay, guys, we have a winner. We have another last question. Ezra, you want to take a look?
Is all the JSON wrappers are being given from an opt-source library that is also maintained in GitHub? JSON wrappers, which one? Like in presentation, is it? If you mean the example that I show, it was the analyzer example. This is not actually the JSON related one. And the JSON wrapper, the JSON from JSON to JSON, it was the regular package that we use, the JSON decoder. Yeah, this one is in, this is directly the Flutter SDK in Analyzer. Let me even share the link in chat. But you can find the annotation verifier change in Dart 3.1 Medium article by Maria. She is also showing another example to understand how it works. For example, using abstract class, showing class hierarchies, and then down there, the check visible outside template, and then how it is changed and refactored by the original author.
Okay, so let me share the screen and I will show you who has won our raffle. So just so you know that I didn't cheat, those are all the names that are filled up the form. And Aviad Kaminsky, you are the winner. Yeah. Enjoy your Lumen. And with that, thank you everyone for this meeting. Happy to hear any feedback. And have a great and quiet week. And of course, thank you, Ezra, for the wonderful presentation.
Thank you for Ariel hosting me. Looking forward to get to know you more. Let's connect in socials. Feel free to ask your questions from anywhere. I check Twitter way much more than others, I guess. So let's follow each other and have a lovely day.